Hey, what's up, guys? Wanted to do a video for you today, and I wanted to go over something that I was talking about with someone the other day as an investor. I was talking about, I actually like lower cap rate properties than I do higher cap rate properties. And there's a reason why, because I know, I cut my teeth. I'm from Texas. I started investing in Texas. I invested from Texas, and then I moved to Hawaii. So, a lot of my real estate investing experience in multifamily properties really came from being in a highly competitive, lower cap rate market than I was used to when I moved to Hawaii. Even though I bounced around to other different cities and states to buy apartment buildings and looking at these other places, I made more money in my own backyard, which was Hawaii on Oahu, and the cap rates were four and threes and maybe low fives, right? So I want to share that with you because the reason why most of the time you're going to find lower cap rates on apartment complexes is because of what I like to call the barriers to entries are different. So there's a couple of different things for barriers to entry. Barriers to entry just mean barrier to entry in a market. Maybe it's harder to get that property. But here's a couple of things that I found that makes a market have lower cap rates on their properties. And to me, a lower cap rate kind of shows a less risky deal, right? Just because there's less inventory. But number one, maybe it's the location. That's a barrier to entry. It's not maybe. That is a barrier to entry. For example, like San Diego, you have the ocean on one side, mountain on the other side, and all of these properties and people are in the middle of that. So you can't get in on the other side. Nothing's happening. That's the ocean. Not going anywhere. That's the Pacific. On the other side, that's the mountain, and that mountain goes up. That right there makes this giant middle ground of location that becomes a barrier to entry. That's one barrier to entry. The other one, maybe it's limited product, limited units, limited product or limited units, meaning like it is a lot harder to buy an apartment complex or an apartment property or to build one in San Diego. The cost is high. I mean, that's another barrier to entry. Is our cost to build. Cost to build. That's another one. So you have limited units. You got location. It's harder to get into, right? Ocean on one side, mountain on the other. So you got all these apartments and people who are living in this area. You have limited amount of units, right? If you take a look at most of the properties here, they're built. The newer stuff started being built like maybe in the 2000, like 2008, 2012, and then it stopped because 2008's market crashed and it got harder to kind of start getting the debt during that time because the housing market crashed. And then there was this huge build and people were buying stuff, knocking it down, building new stuff, and then that stopped. And here we are today where people wanted to start building and the city had to do something about that lack of housing. So they did the thing with the ADUs where you can put in an additional dwelling unit on a smaller property and then on the smaller size property, and they made that easier to do. But that's not going to replace the barriers to entry here. That just means there's more housing. That doesn't mean those are apartment complexes, even though people are looking at it. And then the cost to build. It costs a lot of money to build. Somewhere in and around, depending on where you are with the land acquisition, anywhere from $500 to $600,000 cost to build an apartment complex, unless you're building an ADU complex. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about a great location, great asset, 100, 200, 300 unit that's still affordable. They're not building any affordable apartment complexes or housing. Even though they say they are, it's still different. So that's another barrier to entry. Another barrier to entry in some of these markets is the amount of equity that it takes to get in it. Look, a mom and pop is not going to throw down 20, 30, 50 million dollars as a down payment on some of these complexes. So that is another barrier to entry that when you start looking at these lower cap rate markets, the amount of equity that's required to get into it is a barrier that keeps a lot of competitors out. All right. That's another one. Lack of competition. Lack of competition. For example, in Hawaii, it was the same players all the time. As a matter of fact, in San Diego, it's the same players all the time. You don't see a whole bunch of different people just like vultures circling this market because the barrier to entry to get in actually keeps them out. So they go, hey, you know what? Let's stick to Florida. Let's stick to Georgia. Let's stick to North Carolina. Let's stick to where's another place we like? Let's stick to Texas. All these other things. So there's lack of competition, which means that there's less players. but there's the same amount of property, then it's a lot easier to take a look and make money on these deals. If you get the right deal and hold them long term, you become the holder of the gold, right? He who holds the gold makes the rules. So that was something I wanted to kind of share with that. Next, we have cost to build. Oh, and then the exits. So right away, you have different exits. So you have naturally, you have who's going to buy from you, limited people. Who's going to, if you're holding the best ones, then you're also going to have, you have less competition. Whoever your competition is probably going to need a lot of capital, access to capital and or debt. So they're going to be a bigger player. They're not going to want to build. So they're going to look at buying something existing first because the cost to build is cheaper, as the cost to build is more than buying something existing. There's limited amount of products and your location is sick because it's San Diego. Like as it relates to California, San Diego is the best market for multifamily apartment investing ever. It really is, especially when you're looking at the type of stuff we're looking at. So when you start taking a look at all of those things and you look at a cap rate, your cap rate will be compressed down based on all of these variables. So you're always going to be looking at a 4% to 5% cap rate on some of these assets. I'm talking about great assets. I'm not talking about heavy value add, older 1970s, 60s product. I'm talking, even 80s product. I'm talking about late 90s all the way up through to 2020 to the times that we are now. Like, this is probably what you can expect, but your returns on something like this when you exit the deal, your exit on these deals are going to be anywhere from 2 to 4 times what you would normally get had your cap rate been anywhere from 8 to a 9 on your entry in some of these other markets that people are looking at. That's the challenge that you have now. I'm not saying these other markets are bad. I'm just saying that me personally, when I'm looking at it as a fund manager, as a real estate fund manager, raising capital, taking a look at assets, I understand this better than I understand that. I made less money when I bought properties at an 8 or a 9 cap and then exited them than I did when I bought properties at a 4.5 cap to a 5 cap and then exited out of those markets. I doubled and tripled our money. Really, for the deals that we did, I refinanced our capital out. There were an infinite return. And then later, we sold for triple what we had in those deals, triple and quadruple what we had in the deals. So I'm sharing that with you because these are the things that I'm looking at. What are my barriers to entry? Location, limited amount of units in that market accessible to somebody like myself or other people out there, other players in the market. The cost to build. Cost to build has everything to do with red tape. Sometimes everyone talks bad about different governments and how long it takes to get a permit. That's a benefit sometimes. You don't always want to go into a market that there's a big boom ability to just move over there and build what you want. Like that makes the valuation of other assets that are existing go down, and that creates high level competition in the rental market because people just say, oh, I can move out of where I'm at, move into this brand new place, and then after I move out of there, I'm going to move into another brand new place. Austin is going through that right now. 43,000 units are coming online. Only 20% of those are probably going to get absorbed. That means like 9,000 units to get absorbed. That means they're going to have a lot of concessions. Hey, free rent here, 6 months free, no deposit rent. And a lot of people that are in those newer properties are going to move out into brand new ones because they're going to get drawn out, and that's going to last for a while. That happens a lot. Equity, how much capital do people have access to put down? That is a barrier to entry. Less competitors are going to come into a market because the equity piece that it requires to do, like for us, we underwrite 40% down. A lot of people are like, hey, we're underwriting 35% down. Now, if you don't have to do that, great. But not everybody's going to want to do that because they're looking at the debt side and they're saying, hey, if we don't want to have to put that much money down in that market, it doesn't make sense. For us, it makes sense, right? So lack of competition goes right back to equity, cost to build, limited amount of units and location. If there's less competition, if there's really only a handful of real players in any market. I plan on being one of the largest apartment building owners with retail investors in the world at some point of my career for Bell Capital, and I want to do that with you guys. That means with the lack of competition, we will have an advantage over people who use institutional capital, funds, sovereign funds, banks, all these other things as their partners, because they're going to have to go back to the well and ask. We won't. So we'll have an advantage to be able to move quick in these markets. And last but not least, Exits, multiple exits. There's limit in barriers to entries. There's multiple exits, but there's only a few exits you're going to do. You're going to bundle up your assets or your portfolio and you're going to sell to a bigger player. You're going to refinance and cash out, or you're going to hold those properties, and then later to turn around and sell them on an individual basis to piece your portfolio out slowly but surely. So this is what I'm looking at as it relates to how do I look at lower cap rate markets instead of higher cap rate markets. This is how I make sense of it. Now, other people can't make sense of that because they don't have my goals. Maybe they're not looking to build something big. I am, because I want to make sure that my first target is 4,000 units in a portfolio. My next target is 10,000. And then my next target after that is 40,000 units in our portfolio. And then later we'll push to who knows, man, 100,000 units. That sounds really good, dude. That'll make me one of the top players in the apartments, in the multifamily space, in the industry, period. Just to hit that list of top 50 apartment building owners is a goal of mine. So here's why I look at that. These are the barriers to entry. These are only a couple. There's a lot more, but these are the ones that I'm looking at initially. And then I start digging into more from the apartment asset acquisition, investor, all of those other things as it relates to our company at Bell Capital. So if you have questions, love to talk to you about that. I hope this makes sense. So when you're looking at that, think through this. What are your barriers to entry when you're looking at a deal? Even if you're in markets that are looking at 8-9% cap rates on your assets. Is the barrier to entry, is it the location? Is it the city itself? Is it the location of the property? Are there limited amount of product in that city? Limited amount of units, or are they overbuilding? Is the cost to build keeping people out of it? Is that a barrier to entry as well? The amount of equity needed to buy some of these assets, lack of competition, meaning there's not a lot of other people in there. Maybe that's a barrier to entry. There's not a lot of people entering, which means there's not a lot of people that need to leave it. And last but not least, when you do sell or exit a property, whether you're refinancing or you're reselling that property, whatever it is that you're doing, can you exit it? Are there enough buyers ready to it? Is there enough supply and demand of potential capital ready to take over your portfolio or your investment to make it make sense for you? So that's what I look at, which is why I like lower cap rate markets, because the cap rate or the returns expected on these assets bring in different level of owners and competition into that market. And I like that. So I hope you got something out of this. Like this video, share this video. Give it a thumbs down if you hate it. Don't be a hater and a hider at the same time. But I wanted to do this because hopefully this answers a few questions of why I look at what I do. Now, this isn't for everybody. I get it. But if you're an investor and you're looking at Bell Capital to make an investment, this is what I think through, some of the things I think through with my team, why we look at certain things. Now, we look everywhere, right? But we make sense of what we're looking at, where we're looking based on looking across the United States. We look at hundreds of deals a week. And that is one of the benefits to investing with someone like myself, because we are constantly scouring the market, learning and seeing what's really happening out there so we can get the best deal for ourselves. All right. So let me know if you need anything. Go to bell-capital.com. You can schedule a call with somebody on our team if you want to talk about investing with us, or you can go to Invest Now or Get Started and hit that button and you can take a look at what we have going on, the open fund. You got to be accredited to invest with us only. It's an accredited only fund. And if you just want to talk to us or have questions, love to talk to you. So like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, man. We're trying to get more subscribers. I want to make more videos and content for you guys, things that you guys want to see and want to have your questions answered. I'm here for you. All right. You guys have a great day today. Let's talk soon.